Hello, my name is Mathieu Liénard and welcome to part 2 of my demo on using AWS built-in services to help with Pexip Infinity logs while troubleshooting. In the previous demo, we got the raw logs into CloudWatch Logs and use Lambda function subscribed to the CloudWatch log stream to process and format the logs in JSON and store them on S3 and CloudWatch Logs. In this video, we will use AWS built-in services to help query those logs. As promised, I have released on GitHub the code and CloudFormation template for you to try what I am presenting in this demo. Check the link below. I have tried two methods to search through the logs. The first one uses AWS Glue and Athena. The second one uses CloudWatch Logs Insights. So let's start with the first one. Since we have our logs in S3 by log types, so that all logs with the same data structure are stored together, we can use AWS Glue and create a database and tables of each log format. So I've created two databases that you can see here, one for the audit and one for the support logs, which are provisioned by the CloudFormation template. The CloudFormation template is also provisioning two crawlers. If I run the crawler, again, specific logs into S3. Let's take these ones. So when the crawler has finished running on that particular S3 folder, if we look into the tables, we can see a table corresponding to that S3 folder. And if I look into it, we can see that the crawler has figured out the structure of the data of the logs into that folder. So this is why I was saying in the previous demo that it is important into S3 to have those logs stored by types of logs so that the crawler can figure out a structure for each logs in each folder. Unfortunately, here I can create one crawler per log type because you are limited to 50 crawlers per AWS account. And with both the support logs, we can see here, and the audit logs, there are more than 50 types of logs. So to avoid you running those two crawlers manually on each and every single type of logs, I did it already. And I exported the data structure of each type of logs into a JSON file. So this is the JSON file that is provided on the GitHub page of this project. And for the audit and support logs, there is all the types of logs I have found with the structure, the main structure, and the detail structure. I also created two Lambda functions provisioned by the CloudFormation template to create the tables based on the JSON file and create all the partitions for this one for those tables based on the data stored in S3. This function will have to be run manually. We'll do it right now using a test event and setting this environment variable to true so that it will automatically create all the partitions for the data for each table. Let's run this. So the function has finished its execution. We can see in the logs of that function. So if we look back in Glue, into the tables, we can see here that we now have a table for each type of audit logs and support logs. And if I look into one table, I can see that it has generated the structure for the data, and here the detail field of the log. And if I look into the partition, I can see that there are partitions for the year, month, and day with the data. As a side note, to people not familiar with AWS Glue and Athena, it is important to partition the data so that when you perform a query, you don't perform the query on your entire data set, but on a subset of it. And the reason being that AWS charges you by the number of bytes that it is scanning. At this point, we have all our data structure in Glue, and we can start to use Athena for queries. So if I go into Athena, now this is interesting because I can start to do SQL-like queries like this one, where I will look into the support database for the H323 communications that happen at that date and with a log level of error. Here I can see the logs. I can also do query like this one, where I'm still looking at the support logs for the REST communications, and I'm looking for calls with this call ID. And here I can see the logs. So although this looks nice and promising, using Glue and Athena quickly became very complicated. Because in real life, if I'm troubleshooting the communication with this particular call ID, I will want to see all the logs with this call ID, not just the REST logs. The problem is that all tables have a log message with a different structure. So if I try to do query on two tables like this, where I'm basically looking at logs for the same call ID, but now not just on the REST receive table, but also on the REST sending error, and I try to run this, I will basically end up with an error complaining that the data is different between the two tables. So I cannot do such a query. To do this query, I would have like here to rename the log message. So here it's the REST receive log. So I will rename it, for example, as REST receive log message. And create an additional column where here I will put it to null. And for the REST sending, I will put the log message of the REST sending into that new column. And we'll put the other one to null. And here the query can execute. But as we can imagine, the queries will become quickly complex and very long, because here we are just talking about a query for REST messages, but while if for that call ID, I want to also look at SIP messages, ICE messages, etc., etc. Not only that, the results presented here by Athena, so I have to go all the way to the right to see that additional column, are very hard to read. In fact, the output that we can see here is kind of even worse than what we get into CloudWatch Logs, or even looking at the raw logs into the Pexip server. So as we see using Glue and Athena, because the data are nicely structured into JSON by the Lambda function, it gives us a nice way to query the data using SQL-like queries. However, I find it way too complicated to create queries to be helpful for troubleshooting. I think we would have to build a type of interface on top of it to hide the query complexity and also present the results nicely. But we are not done yet, because remember, our Lambda export function is also writing the JSON formatted logs back into a different log stream in CloudWatch Logs. And at reInvent 2018, AWS announced a new service called CloudWatch Logs Insights. So let's try that. So if I go back to CloudWatch Logs and into Logs Insights and select the log group, which has the JSON formatted logs, I will take the support ones. Here I can see that I can already easily select the dates. And it finds the logs, and it automatically finds the fields that are in all those logs and that I can query. So this is kind of already simpler than using Glue and the crawler. One thing to note here is that when there are logs with the same field, like we can see here, detail, detail 1, detail 2, etc. So this is because there are different logs with the same detail field, but with a different structure inside it. So it creates all those detail version 0, 1, 2, etc. But that won't prevent us from querying the fields that are inside those that detail field. And where this is even more powerful compared to Athena is that when performing a query, I do not have to specify a table. So if I take back the call ID of the communication I was trying to troubleshoot with Athena, which was this one, I can then do a query like this, where here I'm taking all the fields, and basically I'm filtering any type of logs which either has a UUID with this or a call ID with this. And here I get all the logs in a format that is kind of more or easier readable than what we had with Athena. I can see for each log the type of log it is, and I have all the fields that are inside the log message. Of course, on such queries, I can basically refine my query, like with any SQL language, for example. Here I will just take, let's say, the source address and the destination address, for example. And here, so I have all the logs, and the one you see blank is because in their log message there is no source address or destination address field. So this is very powerful because it clears us from the rigidity of Glue tables, allowing us to perform queries, whatever the type of data. The other nice thing about CloudWatch Insights is that it provides many functions to perform computation and statistics on the logs. So for example, I could do a query like this, where I will basically count the name events and name that column number of error logs, and I will classify or group it by date. And for all the logs that have a level of error, and I can see so that for the 19th of May I had 5 logs with a level error. For the 20th of May I had 1 log with the level error, and the 22nd, 3 logs with a level of error. I could also do a query like this, where I will count the distinct conference ID that I can see in the logs, group them by day, so that I can count the number of conferences that are happening per day, for example. And on top of this, you can also export those queries into a CloudWatch dashboard. I have played a bit with it and created my Pexip Infinity dashboard. And here I'm looking at 1 week with the 2 queries, counting the number of log with a level of error per day, the number of conference per day, and here another query which is pulling the logs, the administrator alarms, with a level of warning. And so here I can see that I had several alarms on the 19th and 22nd. Here I had basically connectivity lost. So this node lost connectivity to that conferencing node, for example. So as you could see, although Glue and Athena looked promising at first, it ended up being too rigid and complicated to easily perform queries relevant for troubleshooting. But CloudWatch Logs Insights proved to be extremely powerful because not only you can perform complex queries and logs regardless of their structure, you can also use it to perform analytics and store that into dashboards. I won't go deeper into the queries. You now have the CloudFormation template to provision everything necessary to try it on your environment and hopefully help you with the troubleshooting. While provisioning the template, if you don't want to try Glue and Athena and don't want the audit logs, set the corresponding parameters to false and it will only provision what's necessary to query the support logs into CloudWatch Logs Insights. I think this is quite powerful and I hope it will help you with your troubleshooting. If you come up with interesting queries, maybe you can share them on the wiki page of this GitHub project. I hope you found this demo interesting and useful. Thank you for watching and see you next time.